All right. Hi, everyone. Ahead of our DRC collection that'll be launching this week on October 28th, we are doing an interview with Robbie Stevens from Liv-Ex. We worked with Liv-Ex and their team to help acquire these, very hard to really source wines. So we're really excited to have them on. And Liv-Ex, he'll give you a little bit more background, but they're kind of a source of truth in terms of data and market values, and really the fine wine kind of gurus here. So we're excited to have you, Robbie, and excited to learn more about DRC and how it's performed in the market.
Thank you, Billy, and yeah, exciting to be here. And I guess to slightly introduce myself, my name's Robbie Stevens. I work with Liv-Ex on I'm the head of our Americas side of the business, so I look after that territory, which involves looking after our membership and the services that we offer them. And as Billy very kindly said, we're kind of fine wine gurus. I'm not sure I'd put us in that bracket, but for those of you who kind of haven't heard of Liv-Ex or understand exactly what we do, some have kind of considered us the NASDAQ of fine wine, the London Stock Exchange of fine wine. At the kind of investment end, we give access to businesses, fine wine businesses from across the world, to come and get a bit of price discovery, understand what prices what prices wines are trading for on the market, and then actually buy and sell those wines within our membership. So as I said, we deal with businesses from across the world. We've got 560 members, and we allow them to access some great wines, and in particular this collection, which Vint have acquired from the Liv-Ex marketplace, from some of our members.
And that will just building on there. Not only what's great about Liv-Ex is we've been working with you guys for over a year now, I guess, and you guys have been working for so long in creating this kind of exchange that you guys have a great database of looking back, knowledge, and helping us, kind of provide reference and pricing and valuing some of our collections. So a lot of the numbers you guys might see in our one-sheeters or in other documents, we actually source them from our feeds from Liv-Ex, because they really are one of the best, most accurate sources of data. So that's also will help when you're looking at Robbie's numbers here, or his perspective on the market is very accurate. So
thank you, Billy.
Awesome.
Yeah. So yeah, this DRC collection is made up of 3 bottles of Romanée-Conti in original packaging, and 2010 vintage, and then the 2016 assortment case, which includes 1 bottle of Romanée-Conti, 2 bottles of Tache, 1 of Romanée Saint-Vivant, and 1 of Corton. And to give a bit of background about kind of DRC as a producer, so it stands for Domaine de Romanée-Conti. It's kind of one of, if not the most enigmatic names in the fine wine world. It's regarded by many as Romanée-Conti is regarded by many as the top wine in the world, certainly the best Pinot Noir in the world. Within the world of Burgundy, many kind of people know it colloquially as just the Domaine, which says something about the wine. It's kind of been top of the tree in terms of quality and pedigree within the world of fine wine for quite a while, and it's got that kind of indisputable collectible appeal, I guess, in terms of investment value, and we've got a few graphs and so on which we can look at in a short while to kind of show the performance of DRC over the years, and I think these wines are highly regarded.
Yeah, and to add a little bit more color and history, we're also going to be sharing an article on the Vint website, so you guys can learn a little bit more. I go back into kind of the background about where the domain got its full name from, and it was originally called La Romanée. It was bought by a Prince of Conti. The wines were so good that he actually kept all the wines for his own personal use. So we'll kind of walk you through that history and all the way up to modern day on a separate article, where Robbie will just kind of focus more on the market performance and the value of or the perceived historical values over time of the wines and the general domain.
Absolutely, and it kind of DRC sits, as I said, in that very top echelon of Burgundian wines. It's all of its vineyards are a Grand Cru level of quality, and only 1.5% of Burgundy production is Grand Cru wine. So it's very much at the core, the top of the top of those wines. And I think there's like 33 appellations that have Grand Cru status in Burgundy, and DRC have 2 monopole vineyards, which means that the appellation is that vineyard, and that vineyard is 100% owned by a single domain. So 2 of those wines and vineyards appear in this collection: Romanée-Conti vineyard and the Tache vineyard. And then they also have holdings in Montrachet, Richebourg, Romanée-Saint-Vivant, Grand Echezeaux, and Corton. And I think they also have some holdings in Bâtard Montrachet, which they don't produce commercially. So you're very lucky if you ever get to try that, because I think you only ever get served it at the domain. And I believe they're releasing possibly next year or the year after a premier vintage of Corton Charlemagne, which the origins of, I'm not sure whether they've rented the land or they're renting the land of it, but that's quite exciting. As certainly the Montrachet, the only white wine they produce commercially, Montrachet is very highly regarded as well, and highly investable and collectible product.
Yeah, and it's interesting over the years. I mean, starting from the 60s, they've slowly added on domains to their portfolio, or not domains, but holdings in different areas. And what's kind of interesting is it's not like they just buy the grapes and then start making wine right away. They basically put the vineyards through a rigorous, farming and kind of overhaul process to make sure that it matches the standards of the rest of their vineyards. I was reading there, they've been organic since 1986 and biodynamic farming since 2007, going over to 2008. So that's interesting. That takes, if they were to lease new land, it takes a while to be able to convert everything up to the proper standards. So that's
absolutely
interesting.
And of course, when you've got the name behind you, such as DRC, you're not going to release wine until it's ready. And the other great thing about this collection, I guess, is it's from 2 top vintages, 2010 and 2016. Neither kind of went without their problems within the vintage. In 2016. They didn't even, the domain didn't even commercially release an Echezeaux or a Grand Echezeaux wine because the wines, the vineyards were damaged by frost quite early on in the vintage. I think they bottled something like, and again, only for internal domain consumption, 10% of their normal yields for Echezeaux and Grand Echezeaux. So that's why you'll see, the assortment case has obviously a limited amount of wines in it versus what you would normally find perhaps in a DRC assortment case. They also didn't produce Montrachet that year, and kind of interestingly, that year there was a group of the Montrachet vineyard got pretty decimated by frost as well as, and so a group of 7 vignerons banded together to produce, I think, 1 single barrel of Montrachet which is kind of cool. And again, they've never commercially released it. I have seen a couple of bottles appear on the market and exchange hands. So that's quite cool.
Oh yeah, that's really cool. We'll have to maybe Vint can get their hands on our hands on a couple of those.
Well, yeah, I'll let you know. I'll let you know if I ever see one again. And you know, the other things I guess to mention about these vintages, you know, very high scoring, as you would expect, obviously from such great wines, but you know, and vintages with this kind of pedigree. The 2010 Romanée-Conti, the 3-pack from Burgundy, for example, who you know, one of the prominent critics when it comes to Burgundy gives it 99 points. I think he very, very rarely gives 100 points. I think he's given it to about 5 or 10 wines in the world ever. So that's a pretty high accolade. And then for the 2016, you know, he actually trumps it. It gives it 99 plus. Neil Martin gives the Conti 98. Both of them give the Tash 98 points. And then the Romanée Saint-Vivant 95 and 96 respectively, and the Corton 94 and 92. So, you know, these wines are very much the high regarded wines of the vintage. And, you know, production levels are also pretty limited. I think in any given year, they produce something like 500 cases of Conti, of Romanée-Conti each year. So kind of 6,000 bottles, if that sometimes. And it's quite cool on the labels, they write the name, you know, the number of bottles produced for any vintage. Tash is something like 18,000 cases of wine a year, Corton 450, RSV 1,500 and Richebourg 1,000, somewhere like 1,000. So it's really, you know, limited production, quite clearly defined characteristics in terms of the wines, and as I said, you know, top level in terms of themselves.
Sorry to interrupt there. Yeah, I was gonna say, is La Tâche 18,000 cases or 18,000 bottles?
1,800 cases.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I was like, I thought it was a little lower than that.
Yeah, 1,800 cases. So times that by 12 right. for bottles. I guess, yeah, 15,000 bottles, thereabouts.
Awesome. Yeah, that makes sense. I think I read somewhere for the 2010 Romanée-Conti that or I didn't just read it somewhere. I did my research, and I think they only produced like 386 cases that year, according to one source I saw. So
yeah, and the way they release these wines is you know, they're obviously very, very highly allocated. The allocations are protected. They're built up over time by private clients and so on, who have dealt and bought from the domain in you know, decades in most cases, I would have thought, and they're released into the market. Into, you know, each country will have an agent for those wines. So the UK will have an agent, Corny and Barrow. In the US, it's Wilson Daniels. And so access, you know, they kind of control the access and help the distribution of those wines to the producers. Sorry, to the consumers. And then you kind of find these assortment cases that exist because that will be one single person's allocation, for example. So they're allocated, you know, in this case, that person's allocation was 1 bottle of Romanée-Conti, 2 of Tash, 1 of Romanée Saint-Vivant, and 1 of Corton.
Do they do the mixed cases regularly in OWC, like wooden boxes as well, or are they typically all just sent, you know, as bottles on their own?
No, they tend to be in an OWC, and in this instance, it's in an OWC as well. You know, what's actually rarer these days are the single vineyards in OWC, and you know, as allocations are getting more highly regarded and liquidity is getting more sparse, you're finding, you know, back in the 1980s, I suspect you probably could have found people with allocations of 12 bottles of Romanée-Conti. So you'd see a 12 by 75. Whereas these days, you know, you're only ever seeing 3 by 75s and sometimes, 1/75 OWC. So that's
Can
kind
you
of the
talk
way it's going.
about, from an investment or collector's point of view, can you talk about the extra value that comes with having an OWC versus just like loose bottles? Or not like, it doesn't have to quantitate, but what does that mean to an investor?
Well, there's a kind of, there's no set rule, if you like, but I guess based on the data that we can see and we see transactions occur. So because of their, they're held in such high regard and they're produced in such low volumes, these wines often kind of appear on the market in single bottle volumes. So kind of deriving one thing we do a lot of at Liv-Ex and mentioned this at the start of the conversation is we act as a price discovery tool. So our members can come onto to our exchange and they can check the market price for any given wine. So in kind of high liquid Bordeaux's where it's easy to go and find a case of, or when it's easy, but it's possible to go and find a case of, those market prices tend to be derived from a 12/75 or a 6/75 case format. Whereas when you get into the world of some of these low liquidity Burgundies, we're looking at the single bottle market to derive that market price. And so you tend to sometimes see these if something's in an OWC, you tend to see a premium for those wines. And, as a general rule, based on traded prices we see on Liv-Ex, those kind of OWCs can see a 10 or a 20% uplift in terms of the value of the case versus, if you were to go out and buy the individual bottles and just have them as kind of loose, so to speak. So there's definitely value in that OWC, and it ultimately comes down to provenance and kind of traceability, I guess.
Awesome. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Cool. So you were saying earlier you had a few charts you might want to share. Do you want to pull some of these up and walk us through them?
So let me just pull these up. Can you see that?
One moment. Not yet.
I need to click share. That'll be why.
There we go.
Can you see that?
Yep.
So this is actually a slightly behind the scenes look at part of the Liv-Ex exchange. And so this, one of the roles we have within the industry is we have these indices where we track the price of wine over time. So we have kind of a variety of indices, that look at different baskets of wines. The Liv-Ex Fine Wine 50, for example, is looking at the 5 first growths. Fine Wine 100 is looking at the kind of most actively traded wines on the market. And then you've got the Liv-Ex 1000, which takes into account multiple different regions. So this is a bit of a comparison over 5 years of the performance, if it decides to work. There we go. The performance of the Liv-Ex 1000 component indices. So within that, we've got the Bordeaux 500, which is the top 50 Bordeaux Chateau, the last 10 physical vintages, the Legends, which is kind of 1982s and 1986s and 1989s and so on, Burgundy 150, of which DRC is a principal component of that. We take, individual indices from Echezot, Grand Echezot, RSV, Richebourg, Tache, and Romanée-Conti, and then a couple of other Burgundian wines, Rousseau, Chambertin, for example, Leflèvre, Chevalier Montrachet, and so on. Champagne 50 is 5 champagnes, last 10 physical vintages. Rhone 100 likewise, 5 from the Northern Rhone, 5 from the Southern Rhone. Italy 100, 5 from Piedmont, 5 from Tuscany, and then the rest of the world 60, which takes into account Grange, Taylor's, Screaming Eagle, and so on, and Vega Sicilia. And so kind of in terms of performance over the last 5 years, the Burgundy 150 has outstripped the rest by a reasonably clear margin. So we've got some performance data here. The Burgundy 150 has moved 82% in the last 5 years, which is a pretty compelling argument, I guess. And even month on month in the last, what we've seen, and I'll show in a minute a couple of graphs specifically around DRC, but what we've seen this year specifically, and even in the last 3-4 months, is this surge in demand and pricing around DRC, and a couple of other domains, Domaine Loire, for example, another highly regarded, highly allocated, low liquidity Burgundy wine. And then in terms of DRC in particular, if I pull up, is that coming up? So this is kind of all-time performance of the DRC wines. So you can see, we started off the index in 2003, and it's pretty compelling in terms of price performance. Interestingly, actually, kind of the cheapest access to DRC, Echezeaux, has been the best performing. There's kind of various arguments as to why that might be. One of the main variables there is DRC is a brand. It is a very strong brand, and actually, and we see this with other wines. If people want to be drinking DRC, but they can't necessarily afford, the highest quality, then they'll look at the cheapest entry into that brand. Albeit in this case, it's still $2,500 a bottle to get involved with Echezeaux. And then the 5-year chart. So a lot of this market move was part of it was actually around kind of slightly geopolitical events like the Brexit vote, which caused a huge change in obviously forex and currency rates, with the pound weakening against every single currency in the world pretty much, and so it made UK based stock, of which the UK holds a lot of global fine wine stores. It made it look quite cheap compared to other countries, and so we did see this surge in price, and then in more recent times as well, we've had this kind of COVID kick, I guess, where people have taken an increased. There's been increased attention in collectibles, which obviously you guys are more specialist in than I. But wine, has seen pretty low volatility during the time, and so that's kind of been in the spotlight. And then finally, as I was speaking about earlier, we've got this 1 year analysis, and so you've got all of them are performing at 6% plus, with some of the wines moving 20% over the course of 1 year, and so on, with especially in the last 6 months.
Yeah, this is great to this chart we actually include in our one sheet, which is great.
Do you?
Yeah,
awesome.
no, this was a great one. And what's interesting to me is Romanée-Conti in this chart, is a little lower in terms of just pure gains. It's just on an index level. It's obviously the most sought after. But the 2010 over the past year has outperformed not all of these, but a lot of them. Like the 2010 vintage of Romanée-Conti has seen that like the same gains at 20% plus as the other ones. So it's been exciting to have that there as well. So cool. Well, thank you for sharing these. This has been great. I mean, we can throw it up there.
Throw it up here versus, we can look at it maybe just versus the Burgundy 150.
Yeah, as long as we rebase there because of that bottom line.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. There we go. And then if we rebase this, so yeah, over the last 5 years, it's moved, nearly 100% from rebase to 100, and it's just clipping over 200. So a 5 year move, 110% for that wine. And that's kind of happened across the board, I think, on a lot of these top vintage Romanée-Contis that they're becoming highly sought after.
One question for you, it's kind of a morbid question looking forward, but do you think that anyone's taking into account what's his name, Armand de Valon's
Yeah.
age? And also I've, in my preparing for this collection, I realized the Chef de Cave is also, he's been there since like 1985, and he took over from his father who was there since like 1940. So it's been the same cellar master and kind of head winemaker for decades now. Do you think that collectors are going to take that into account as these people they're reaching closer to their 80s now, and that flips over? Do you think some de Valon wines are going to be valued in the future differently than is next person?
It could, it could be. Some people might look at it like that. I think there's certainly there's data to suggest that some of these wines do see a bit of a bounce, when their proprietors sadly died. We've seen things in the last few years. Top wine growers like Soldera saw a bit of a price jump. I'm trying to think of Henri Bonneau. It was another one relatively recently. So it might be a factor. I'm not sure if how much one might attribute to that. Yeah. And I don't know, but I'm sure that DRC have various contingency plans in place, and succession plans. I think the Chef Tav has got his son working for him as well.
Oh, awesome.
Off the top of my head, but that might be wrong. So yeah, as to kind of what attributes to the price of wine, I think that's possibly a factor. But there's with something like DRC, there's also lots of other discerning features of the wine and the brand and why it's moved like it has in the last 5-10 years.
Yeah, no, that was the point that was brought up to me by someone else recently, and I thought it was interesting. For the sake of the wine and just in general, I hope he lives for an extremely long time, because he's obviously been doing great work. So yeah, that's really interesting. I just wanted to get your perspective on that.
No, absolutely. And the other thing to I guess mention with regards to maybe I'll stop sharing my screen now. With regards to kind of DRC's position within the market, so one of the things that we've seen, I think Burgundy this year has made up about 20% of value traded on Liv-Ex, and of that, DRC makes up about 14% of Burgundy trade by value. Excuse me. So that's it takes up the greatest share, certainly, of Burgundy trade by value, and Romanée-Conti Tache and Romanée Saint-Vivant lead that share by value.
Yeah, that's really exciting. I think we may have pointed that out in our one sheeter. One thing we did point out is they're definitely the top Burgundy right now in Asia as well. And I think the top 2 bottles by value in 2021 were also DRC bottles, even beating out some first growth Bordeaux in that market.
Yeah,
So it's kind of exciting to see them, while, the Burgundy market as a whole, as you've shown, is growing. So, I know that percentage of 14 is actually lower than what it once was, which is really interesting. But that's just because of the sheer volume of Burgundy growing, which is great, because that alone, that awareness and that further interest across the globe is actually going to be driving interest in DRC as well. So
absolutely. There's just one other chart actually I can pull up for you, which kind of shows that that change, I guess, that we've seen.
And one thing that's, while you're pulling this up, that's interesting to me is the part of the interest in Burgundy that's come as opposed to Bordeaux in recent years is due to a lot of the public's recent awareness and perspective on terroir, and kind of a new focus on a sense of place, which
Right.
I don't know how many people know that Bordeaux Chateau, it's kind of like a brand name. Like, those Chateau can grow their vineyard holdings as much as they want and still call it that same wine, whereas Bordeaux or Burgundy, you can only call wines from that certain vineyard, that vineyard. So I think that's part of the increased interest in Burgundy across the globe. I think it corresponds perfectly with that sense of place and interest in terroir, which is not showing any sign of slowing. So that's exciting.
Yeah, and touching on both of those points, the Asia point, I guess, that you mentioned. This is our trade share by value that we've seen over the last 10 years. The red line here, which attributes to this, is the Bordeaux line. So back in 2010, when we had this huge Asia bull run, and it was largely based around the sourcing of red Bordeaux and key brand names like Lafite and Petrus. 95% of what we traded, and I guess by extension, one thing, Liv-Ex is independent. We don't control what we trade specifically, in terms of the wines. We make sure that what we trade is we check the stock and so on, but the market decides what the prices are and what's traded effectively. So back in 2010, 95% Bordeaux, and that's moved right down to kind of 40% year to date. So it's still a considerable part of the market, but certainly waning. And in its place, as you can see over the last 5 years, especially, Burgundy has made a pretty big march on taking a pretty healthy trade share. As I said, it's just about 20% this year. And then Italy and Champagne, which I know links into some of your other collections, have also seen pretty good performance and trade growth over the last few years. Not least one of those, the US tariffs, or the lack of tariffs on Champagne and Italy, helped attribute to that. But yeah, Burgundy seems to have kind of cemented its place now at trading kind of 20% of the market.
Awesome.
And one of the things I think surrounding your point around terroir and people understanding it a bit more and so on is the Asia market, I think, as while they still buy a huge amount of Bordeaux, there has been this move towards buying more and more Burgundy. And obviously, if you're buying Lafite, then you also want to buy the top names in Burgundy, and brands like DRC are going to benefit from that.
Agreed. I'm happy. I've looked at this chart personally, and it's great to be able to share it with our broader investor group here. But it is really interesting, and it just goes to show the quality of the wine around the world is generally being, it's increasing, which is great, which is why we have collections from all over the world rather than just focusing on a single region. So it's an exciting time to be in the world of fine wine.
Absolutely, yeah. The market's definitely broadening, as you can see.
Awesome. Well, I think this has been a great overview, great market insight to Burgundy, DRC. So do you have anything else you want to add, or I think we'll go ahead and wrap up here.
No. Well, just to say thanks for having me on. It's been a pleasure.
Appreciate you making it work here.
Excellent, and hopefully you have a successful launch.
Yeah, no, we'll keep you posted. But yeah, no, we're looking forward to it. We've seen excitement around our initial announcement email, so we're looking forward to a great day. But thanks again, Robbie, and we'll speak soon.
Great. Cheers, Billy. See you soon.
Cheers. Bye.